What's up, guys? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY in the overall market. I'm going to break down some very important things that Cathie is doing right now. She did sell a small amount of Tesla shares, but I'll break down more details about that. And also what's going on with our economic calendar as we have FOMC and Tesla's earnings very, very soon. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total, and the offer ends at the end of March. Anyways, Tesla has been on a bit of a downtrend for the last couple of months, but the question is what's going to happen with FOMC and their earnings, which is going to be for today. Just know that earnings is going to be after market close for Tesla, Meta, Microsoft, and IBM. So get ready for some high volatility in tech. Now, looking at some headlines, we're going to start off with this one right here. There is some news right here about how Cathie Wood has made a very, very notable move. She actually just sold about 20,392 shares of Tesla, which is approximately about $8.1 million worth. There were some talks about how there's going to be some cuts to the EV tax credits. So many people think that that's the reason why this happened. This was highlighted by Gary Black very, very recently, and that could be leading to some uncertainties about Tesla. Now, is it a big deal that she sold about $8 million worth of it? Well, I would say I wouldn't worry too much about that because when you look at ARK Invest's net holdings, they actually have about $894 million worth of Tesla right now. That's a 13.4% weight in their overall holdings. So they're still holding almost $900 million worth of Tesla. $8 million of them selling it is just like nothing. It's just a little bit of, Tesla shares being offloaded before earnings to mitigate risk. Not really that big of a deal, in my opinion. I'm not really too worried about this, no matter what the headlines try to insinuate. For today's earnings, okay, investors are going to be looking for more details about the company's robotaxi rollouts ahead of its Q4 earnings. There's also going to be a lot more talk about what's happening with Musk's involvement in politics and what Tesla gives us when it comes to a possible new model and factors just like that. So I'll be listening to that very, very closely today. There also is some news that Tesla's announced that all of their V4 supercharger stations in North America are now capable of delivering charging speeds of up to 325 kilowatt hours. So that's very, very awesome. 325 kilowatts. That's bringing the network more in line with high-powered chargers, just like the ones that are out there. So it's some good news that's come out, at least for Tesla. Hopefully, this helps them continue to increase their speeds, and this will help their users a lot more. So I think that's going to reduce waiting times, and then that's very, very, very good for their customers, if anything. Moving forward, I just want to mention that today is Wednesday. There's not really much data coming out, and what tends to happen is the market tends to be very quiet on FOMC days approaching our data. And once our data comes out at 2 p.m., we have the rates decision coming out, which the Fed will most likely keep rates the same. Then we have the press conference at 2:30 p.m., which is when Jerome Powell is going to give a speech. Just know that there's currently about a 99% chance we get a pause. So the Fed is likely not going to do anything. And if the Fed announces that, it's going to cause a big move. So get ready for all of this. We have big tech earnings and Jerome Powell giving a speech. I also want to mention that ASML rose about 9% after they just had their earnings right now. They did relatively well. We saw a nice increase in their bookings for Q4. And then their overall demand is still very, very strong when it comes to their advancements. So good news. We saw their EPS above expectations at $6, about €6 and 85 cents, and also their net booking quarter is at 7.1 billion euros above expectations. They had good guidance, if anything, so good news for them. So that's one of the earnings that just came out like right now. So just keep that in mind. Good for chips, if anything. So what do I see for the markets? We want to see if Tesla could break this resistance. We have 400 to 402 as our resistance zone, and we have 384 as our support. Tesla's not really doing anything, guys. Look at the last couple of days. All Tesla's doing is just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's going to likely just continue to go back and forth between these levels, guys. Get very, very tight between 400 and 384, going back and forth like this. That's all Tesla's going to likely do until we get earnings. And actually, Jerome Powell's speech will be the first factor and then earnings. So will Jerome Powell launch us first? And then will he also like dump us? It depends on what the guy ends up saying. And then that's just the first factor. The second factor is what happens with earnings. Does earnings launch us back up like this to make a big run, or do we get a big rug pull? I'll be watching this very, very close, and I'll talk more about the levels in a couple of hours. But for now, make sure you guys know that Tesla's going to be very choppy for the time being. Most likely, if we could get back above 400 to 402, we're looking for 409 as our target. If we can't hold 390, look for 384 as the main support. Otherwise, I just think we're going to shuffle for now until we get earnings. So keep that in mind. As far as SPY goes, I think SPY is going to retrace a little bit. There might be some selling pressure that comes right before FOMC. We could retrace back down close to about like the 602 area. And then we'll be watching to see, does Jerome Powell pump us back up? Does the decision cause us to push back up to fill this gap like this? And then another question is, will Jerome Powell launch the market higher? Does he give like a big rug pull? It depends on what the big guy says. So make sure you guys are ready for this just to be safe. That's going to be critical for the way this market ends up moving. So please keep that in mind. So make sure you watch these levels very closely. Anticipate a little bit more downside for SPY. It could retrace to about 602 to 600. Then we'll see if it bounces back up to 604. And eventually, when the decision comes out, we'll be watching to see if this gap gets filled. So watch that very closely. For the time being, there could be a small retracement. I'm seeing the same thing on the QQQ. It could retrace closer to like 520 or so. Might be a little bit of a dip that's coming, just a small one. Then we'll see if we get a bounce later on thanks to Powell or not. When the decision comes out, we might make a move like this. And then Jerome Powell's either going to launch this all the way back into the 530s or he causes a big rug pull. That's going to be the next big factor. But for now, look for a little retracement right here before we continue to try to bounce. The Russell, same thing. It might retrace back down to 225. It's not really that big of a move, a small dip before we see some buyers try to return. ES is dipping here, might be retesting 6,080, if not 6,063 for a small retracement. Then we'll see if we get a bounce. We still have a gap to fill up here. If we lose 6,060, we're looking for a dip back down to 6,030. So look for a small dip, and we'll see if we get a bounce or not. For NQ, we could be dipping back down to 21,500. We'll see if we bounce or not, especially if we have a gap to fill above. Look for a small dip to the low 21,500, and we'll see if buyers return or not. So give it some time. For Bitcoin is dipping back down to like 101,000 and then 100,000 right over here. So it might be a small dip here, and we'll see if we get some kind of bounce or not. But if anything, I think that even though if there's this small little retracement right here, we will see if buyers return after FOMC or not. It's still very possible it tries to fill this imbalance. So I'll be waiting for that, but look for a small pullback just for the time being. Nvda, I want to mention that this morning it's also showing signs of pulling back a little bit towards like 123. There's a huge gap to fill up here. So as long as it does not end up losing like 120 to 117 again, this could just be like a small retracement. It could just retrace a little bit like this. And hopefully we get some kind of bounce back up to like 133. As long as we just don't lose these lows, this could just be a higher low that's going to be made before it tries to bounce. So I'll be watching this very, very closely. For Tesla, like I said before, we're just range bound, so give that some time to develop. For Aapl is in a very interesting phase. It's going to likely dip more. I was talking about this yesterday. We could be retesting these lows right here. We'll have to see if we get a bounce. I do expect it to dip towards 230, and then we'll see if we get a bounce to form an inverse head and shoulders. We'll see, guys. That's going to be very key for the way we end up moving. For a coin, we're slowly uptrending. I think that this could be forming like a flag. So if it comes down like this, can we get back above 285? If 285 is reclaimed, then yes, we could eventually try to fill this gap. If not, it could be dipping. So I'll be watching that very, very closely. For Amazon's bullish, looking for 240 to be retested. Might shuffle between 235 and 240 for some time before we see some buyers push it back up to 245. Meta is very bullish approaching earnings. We have 680's resistance. May shuffle here before it breaks out closer to about the 690 area. Looks bullish to me. Microsoft is bullish because we have earnings coming up and there's buyers continuing to defend it. I wouldn't be surprised if we shuffle around 448. That's where we have a tough resistance. But if we break that, I think it easily goes up to about like 450 to 452. Google's trying to fill this gap. Might slow down a little bit, retest like a 196 shuffle, and then eventually might try to push for 200. I would love to see it break out. If we break past 198, I think it tries to fill this gap towards the low 200s. That being said, the VIX still has this big gap to fill, and then the market is still in a very interesting place. So the upside might not be done yet. There might be a little pullback first before we see some more buyers potentially come in, so keep that in mind. Anyways, that's it for my analysis. Thank you for listening, guys. Have a good one, and peace out.